The silence aboard the drifting warship was unnatural. Not the kind of silence that came from vacuum or the calm after battle, but a stillness thick and charged like the breath of something ancient, waiting. The vessel, once named Calthervun, had become a ghost in the galactic archives. It hovered in orbit around no known world, hidden in the rift between mapped regions of space, a rift that twisted sensors and bent light like a whisper of a forgotten god. It was there, in the tangled dark, that humanity sent its most disposable emissary. Jonas Cade wasn't special. He wasn't a hero, not by any current metric. He was young, a decent zero-gravity mechanic, and only recently graduated from the Terran Diplomatic Corps with middling marks in xenopsychology. He hadn't been first in class. He hadn't even been in the top half. But Jonas had two things others didn't: a reckless willingness to volunteer for assignments no one wanted, and the misfortune of being in the wrong communications terminal when the ping came through. Unidentified signal. Origin: prescribed zone 5D. Encryption: pre-collapsed Dryathi language matrix. Risk: level 10. The Dryathi. Every species in the galaxy had their boogeymen. For the Xylarn, it was the Flame Worlders. For the Eldavari, the cursed Goliath spawn. But for nearly every known race across 4 spiral arms, it was the Dryathi, ancient, near-immortal warriors bred for a war that had consumed galaxies and then disappeared so completely it became myth. They hadn't been seen in over 10,000 years. Until now, the signal was unmistakable. The language, the structure, archaic, sharp, and imperial. And the coordinates led to Calthervun, a name that translated, roughly, as Vessel of Silent Judgment. Jonas had read the dossier twice. Then again, then a third time while still zipping up his suit. His transport pod, Pelican, was basic, no weapons, no AI, just atmospheric control, directional thrusters, and an emergency recall button no one thought would work this deep in space. It wasn't a mission of war or diplomacy. It was containment. If anything was alive on that ship, it was better to have one human sacrifice than provoke a galactic incident. At least, that's what the Unified Council told itself. The docking procedure was rough. Gravity swayed. Static clawed at his helmet. The old airlock hissed, open with a growl, like something breathing for the first time in millennia. And Jonas stepped inside, feeling like an idiot. Lights flickered as his boots clanged against ancient metal. Dryathi ships were works of brutalist art. Sharp, jagged structures of black alloy that could heal themselves mid-battle and bleed like living things. The corridors were narrow, and the walls were etched with runes he didn't understand but felt. His translator implant couldn't parse the glyphs. They pulsed in faint crimson. And then, he found the throne. It wasn't a control room, not really. More like a sanctum, long, circular, ringed with petrified banners. A central pedestal held a towering seat carved of something that shimmered like obsidian and bone. Slumped in it was the body, 10 feet tall, even seated. Thick armor fused to flesh in a way that made Jonas's stomach churn. Spikes ran along the collarbone like teeth, and a helm, shaped like the head of a falcon, covered its face. Long dreadlock-like cords hung down its back, tipped with crystallized metal. A single red eye, pulsing faintly through the helm's visor, followed him as he entered. Jonas froze. He whispered. Hi. The voice that answered him wasn't sound. It was pressure. Weight. Like the meaning of words pressing directly into his skull. You are not of the stars. You are of dirt and bone. His legs wanted to run, but the ship's doors sealed behind him. No retreat. Only forward. I'm Jonas. From Earth. I think you might have pinged our beacon. Silence. Then, you are not worthy to stand here. Well, neither was anyone else, Jonas muttered, too quietly to be heard. Except somehow, he knew the being had. Do you seek glory? He blinked. No. Do you seek blood? What? No. The light in the eye shifted. Not dimmed. Not brightened. Shifted. Then why? Jonas looked around, heart hammering. I don't know. Maybe because someone had to. Maybe because you're just here. Alone. And I figured. I could at least try. The eye blinked, if a red crystal slit could blink. The presence paused, then leaned forward. Metal groaned. The air changed. Something unseen stirred. All others fled. All who came to conquer died. You stand. You speak. You do not shake. I'm shaking, Jonas said. You do not shake enough. There was a hiss as the being rose, slowly, methodically. Joints cracked. The armor flexed like muscle, like it hadn't moved in eons. Jonas took a step back, and the warrior took a step forward. Name: Jonas Cade. You will remember this moment, Jonas Cade, for it marks the beginning of the unraveling. He swallowed. Unraveling of what? The being leaned close. The helm split down the middle, not revealing a face, but more of the same darkness, like an abyss that blinked. Everything. Jonas felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from something older, as if history itself had shifted its gaze toward him. The warrior stepped past him. Doors that hadn't opened in millennia hissed. Lights came alive, and the ship moved. Systems reactivated. Echoes filled the corridors. Lights flickered to life like awakening nerves. Jonas turned in disbelief as the engines roared low and deep like a buried storm returning to the sky. Wait, where are we going? The being didn't answer, but Jonas understood. Something old had awakened, and it had chosen him to witness the end of silence. The Calthervun didn't travel through space so much as cleave through it. Jonas felt the motion in his teeth. The ship didn't use modern drive tech. It folded between spatial harmonics like a ghost slipping through seams of reality. There was no view, no stars, just the sensation of movement and the hum of something very large remembering how to move. The warrior hadn't said another word. It walked the halls as if reclaiming a lost empire with every step. Jonas followed, if only because the ship itself seemed to want him alive. Doors opened for him. Air remained breathable. Lights flickered to guide him. It was as if the Calthervun accepted him, or at least tolerated him. That alone should have been impossible. He tried logging updates to his datapad, but the signal scrambled, corrupted every time. His only record was a constant stream of notes he mumbled to himself, trying to document the impossible, trying to stay sane. Day 1, no food, limited water. Ship seems organic metallic hybrid. Dryothi tech, not supposed to work anymore, but it's working. Being on board is like living in the middle of a heartbeat. He paused. No idea where we're going. On the 3rd day, he met the other voices. They didn't come in the form of bodies. They were holograms, flickers of soldiers, Dryothi warriors preserved in memory cores embedded in the walls. Each one spoke in the same grim, toneless echo, recounting battles long past, worlds lost, betrayals. One, a female, knelt beside a shattered command spire and whispered, "We failed her. The sovereign flame. We failed." Jonas turned to the warrior, who had paused, watching the projection. Who was she, he asked. The red eye didn't flicker, but for the first time, the voice came softer. She was the end. A pause. And the beginning. The mystery deepened. Jonas no longer believed the warrior was simply a soldier. No, there was command in the way it moved, grief in the long pauses, and an intelligence that watched. Not like a predator, but like a judge. The being wasn't just old. It was responsible. And Jonas was sure of one thing. This wasn't a mission of observation anymore. Something was unfolding. Something ancient had waited long enough. When they emerged from the rift, the stars were wrong. Jonas checked his internal chronometer. 3 days. Only 3 days had passed for him, but the ship had jumped hundreds of light years. They now hovered above a shattered world, a graveyard planet called Attraction Prime. The surface was a mosaic of broken cities, blackened spires, and rotting megafauna left from wars no modern species remembered. Jonas had seen images before. The Council had sealed the planet centuries ago. No one was supposed to land. The very air was classified as hostile nanoweapon residue. The warrior descended. Jonas followed. The atmosphere choked him the moment he stepped onto the surface. His suit auto-sealed, filter screeching. But the warrior strode forward, unaffected, armor pulsing faintly with red veins of light that burned the nanites away with each step. "What are we doing here?" Jonas coughed. The warrior stopped before a monolith. Not a ruin, not rubble. A black column nearly 100 feet high, pulsing like a heartbeat. Symbols etched into it. Jonas's translator flared, trying to parse them. Keynote. Sovereign data. Genetic match required. And then the pulse changed. Jonas staggered. His veins felt like fire for one wild second. Something scanned him, searched him. Not just his body, but his blood, his memory, his past. What the hell? The monolith cracked open. Inside was a single throne, much like the one aboard the ship, but smaller, sleeker, and in it, not a corpse, a child, or what resembled one. Female, humanoid, mostly. Silver blue skin, long tendrils in place of hair, and eyes shut in eternal sleep. She breathed, shallow and slow, but Jonas's sensors didn't read any sign of typical life. The warrior dropped to one knee. Jonas stared. "Who is that?" The voice came again, distant now, reverent. "She is the key, the last seed of the flame." He stepped closer. "She's alive. She is not yet awake." Jonas hesitated. "Then why now? Why me?" The warrior finally turned. "Because you were not supposed to come. Because no one was supposed to return. Because you are the only one who did not fear what you did not understand." The words sank into him like ice. He hadn't come for glory. He hadn't come for knowledge. He came because someone had to. And now he stood at the heart of something so ancient, so carefully hidden, that had slept for millennia in the hope of a single variable, chance. The girl stirred. Only a flicker of movement, but the monolith began to pulse faster. Systems activated. Jonas's suit screamed as data flooded his visor. Thousands of alien sigils, sound files, history logs. The memories of a dying empire poured into him like a dam breaking. He saw flashes, worlds burning, fleets shattering, Dryathi warriors falling in noble defeat. And then the flame, the sovereign flame, a being of pure will and fire, bound to the Dryathi by purpose. Their protector, their god, their queen, destroyed in betrayal. But not completely. Jonas fell to his knees, gasping, the vision fading. And the warrior whispered, "She has chosen you." Jonas blinked. "Chosen me for what?" The being's answer came not in words, but in action. The child's eyes opened, and the planet's sky turned red. Above, satellites activated, long-dead sentinels blinking awake. Across the ruins, automated defenses powered on. The graveyard world was waking, and it had sensed something ancient stir. Jonas stood up, swaying. "We have to go." "No." The warrior stepped toward the child. Gently, it lifted her from the throne, cradled her like something sacred. She stared at Jonas, her alien eyes calm, curious. Then, her small fingers reached toward him. He flinched, but touched her hand. In that moment, he felt her. Not in thought, not in words, in memory. A vast, terrible memory of a time when the stars themselves bent to her will. He gasped. She is the beginning. She is the end. And she is your burden now." Above, ships appeared. Not theirs. Alien designs. Newer. Sleek. The kind used by bounty hunters, scavengers, or worse, council extermination units. Jonas's visor flashed red. Incoming hostiles. Someone had been watching, and now they wanted what had awakened. They came fast and without a hail. 6 ships. Sleek. Black. Silent. Council design, but not registered. Extermination class. Jonas recognized the model. Vornix hunters. These weren't diplomats. These weren't salvage teams. They were the kind of units sent to erase things. Quietly. Permanently. The girl in the warrior's arms blinked slowly, tilting her head as if listening to some far-off music. The warrior, unfazed, turned and began walking back toward the monolith's opening. Jonas ran after them. "They're going to land. We need cover, or evac, something. There will be no escape." "Then what are we doing?" "Finishing what was promised." The warrior walked straight into the monolith's pulsing inner chamber. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the ground trembled. Jonas staggered, gripping the wall as energy surged around them. Behind, the sky cracked open. Dropships launched, hundreds of armed units descending like steel locusts. Plasma trails lit the dark. Inside the monolith, the air changed. It smelled of ozone and dust and power. Then Jonas saw it, an ancient core, suspended in the ceiling like a beating heart of crystal and silver. The warrior raised the child, no, the sovereign seed, toward it. For a second, nothing happened. Then a piercing sound filled the chamber, something like a scream and a hymn at once. The seed's body glowed. A low hum rose beneath their feet. Jonas's bones felt soft. He backed away, overwhelmed. What is this? The warrior didn't answer. The seed fused with the core. Not literally. There was no melting or merging. But the moment her fingers brushed it, the entire chamber changed. Geometry shifted. Walls bent inward. The architecture restructured itself, as if remembering a former shape. And then came a message, projected directly into Jonas's mind. A voice, not the warrior's, not the child's, but old, wounded, proud. To the child of soul, descendant of conflict and heart, bearer of anomaly. You have been chosen not by legacy, but by defiance. You stood where others fled. You touched what others feared. You listened when silence was safe. Jonas dropped to his knees. What are you talking about? You carry the echo of our end, and perhaps our future. He screamed as light shot through his head. Images, data, memories not his own. He saw a time before collapse, Dryathi fleets shining like stars, empires kneeling in awe. The sovereign flame at the center, not ruling by power, but by presence. She united the species not through war, but by being impossible to ignore. Then betrayal, not from outside, from within. One of the high oracles, humanoid in form, pale as moonstone, struck first. The flame's own counsel shattered her connection to the astral core, scattering her fragments across the galaxy. The warrior, Zarvikoin, was the last of her aegis, a guardian designed not to protect a person, but a promise. Jonas gasped as the vision faded. And then the girl, the seed, spoke, not with words, but with thoughts, clear, piercing. You are not Dryathi, yet I see them in you. Their cruelty, their kindness, their curiosity. Jonas shuddered. I'm just human. She blinked. Exactly. Outside, the extermination units reached the monolith, and the sky bled fire. Dozens of soldiers poured in through the fissures in the ground, weapons up. Energy crackled in their gauntlets, ion blades, scatter rifles, suppression tech. They moved like ghosts, trained, efficient. One raised a weapon toward Jonas. The warrior moved. No blur, no sound, just sudden death. The soldier dropped, sliced diagonally from hip to collar. Sparks and blood sprayed across the wall. In a single motion, Zarvikoin hurled the child to Jonas, who barely caught her without crumpling to the ground. Protect her. Wait, what are you? Zar didn't reply, only turned and walked toward the invaders. Jonas scrambled back, shielding the seed, heart pounding as the monolith shifted again, this time forming protective barriers. Data crawled across his visor. Something ancient was waking, something inside him. The light from the sovereign's touch still burned in his chest, like a mark. Another voice, an echo of the same projection, whispered, You are not ready, but she is. The seed looked up at him and placed her palm against his heart. In that instant, he saw what she truly was. Not just a child, not just a relic. She was hope, compressed in a genetic code. The Dryathi's last attempt to preserve compassion through blood and light. She carried not weapons, but memory. Not destruction, but redemption. Jonas wept. And then the warrior roared. Zar moved through the enemy like a storm wrapped in steel. Blades of light unfolded from his wrists. Every strike was precision. Each motion, a memory of war. These soldiers had training. Zar had purpose. They fell, one by one. Whole squads, gone before they could scream. But they kept coming. Even Zar, impossibly powerful, began to slow. Damage built on his armor. Blood darkened his side. Jonas reached for a fallen rifle. He didn't even know how to fire it. Modern weapons were restricted from civilians. But instinct, desperation, and rage gave him clarity. He stood beside the child and fired. The rifle bucked. A beam of energy ripped into a soldier mid-leap, dropping them in a flare of light. Jonas kept shooting, not with skill, but with defiance. The seed glowed beside him, unafraid. And for a second, they stood together, not as warrior and weapon, but as two beings caught in the spiral of history, refusing to let the past repeat. Above them, satellites turned. The council had noticed. Bigger forces were inbound. Jonas looked at the seed. "What happens now?" She replied, voice finally her own. "Now, you choose whether you run or finish what they began." And outside, Zarvikuin stood bleeding before a final wave of enemies. He roared, not with anger, but something deeper. Long live the flame. The enemies opened fire, and the sky exploded. The sky came apart in white fire. From orbit, a council-class dreadnought descended with no warning. It burned through the clouds like a falling star, weapons systems glowing with pre-ignition energy. Jonas shielded the seed with his own body as shockwaves rippled through the ground, shaking the monolith's ancient architecture. Chunks of stone and memory fell like rain. The extermination units, momentarily scattered by the blast, regrouped with terrifying speed. A third wave pushed through the debris. These weren't scouts anymore. These were sentries, genetically hardened, armor-layered, connected by hive link. Each one moved with brutal precision. Zarvikuin stood in front of them, swaying slightly. His left arm no longer responded. Armor torn, flesh exposed. The glowing matrix beneath his chest plate flickered unevenly, his internal systems visibly collapsing. But still he stood. Jonas saw the warrior tilt his head to the side, and for the first time, something cracked in his voice. Not pain, not weakness, but something ancient and tragic. "She is awake. You are too late." The leader of the sentry wave stepped forward. Its voice was modulated, emotionless. "Decommission. Final warning." Zar's blades flared to life once more, and with a breath that seemed to pull gravity itself toward him, he charged. The impact was biblical. Where Zar struck, metal shattered. Energy fields failed. Jonas watched, wide-eyed, as the warrior moved like entropy made flesh, unpredictable, violent, unstoppable. But the sentries adapted. They shifted into a circle formation, forcing the warrior into a containment zone of kinetic suppressors. Field lines sparked across his armor, slowing each of his movements by fractions. They stabbed over and over, with monomolecular lances that pierced even Dryothi alloy. And yet, Zar didn't scream. He kept fighting, until he dropped to one knee. The seed, still clutching Jonas's hand, whispered they'll kill him. Jonas couldn't breathe. His whole life, he'd fix things. Machines, circuits, never people, never warriors older than empires. But now he ran. He didn't know why, just that he had to. He sprinted into the field, heart racing, dodging debris, sliding beneath sparks and bullets. A sentry turned toward him. Jonas fired without thinking, catching it in the neck. It collapsed, spasming, and he was beside Zar in seconds. The warrior looked up at him. "Leave." "No, you cannot stop them. I'm not here to stop them." He shoved a fusion cell from his salvaged rifle into the core slot behind Zar's shoulder plate. "Just here to buy time." The warrior looked surprised, then smiled. A terrifying, beautiful smile. Jonas braced himself, and Zar stood. The fusion core flared, overloading systems, blasting a surge of unstable energy into the warrior's limbs. He exploded forward like a meteor, slamming into the sentries with renewed force. Bones broke, circuits melted, and Jonas, now exposed, felt a pulse behind him. The seed. She floated, eyes glowing, limbs weightless, hair lifting with unseen wind. The core inside the monolith had fused fully with her body. She was no longer just the sovereign seed. She was the awakened flame. The child screamed, not in fear, but in memory. A wave of golden energy surged outward, vaporizing the remaining enemy units. Jonas dropped to the ground, ears ringing, shielding his head as reality blurred. The dreadnought above halted mid-descent, its weapons power down. Jonas looked up in disbelief. They're retreating? Zar limped beside him. No, they are waiting. The sky rumbled again. But it wasn't ships this time. It was words, broadcast into every mind on the surface. Every being, every soldier, every living creature. A psychic announcement so massive it cracked birdsong and silenced the wind. The flame has returned. Then nothing. Stillness. Even a monolith stopped humming. The seed floated gently to the ground. She was crying. Jonas ran to her, wrapped her in his arms. Are you okay? What was that? Her voice was quiet, but not childlike. I remember everything. And in that moment, Jonas saw it. A universe that had once been peaceful, that fell not because of greed, but fear, that tried to erase its own protectors, terrified of their power. And now, for the first time in 10,000 years, the thing they feared most had returned. Not a warrior, not a weapon, but hope. Then Zar fell. Jonas caught him. Blood. Viscous. Alien. Metallic. Jonas looked at the warrior's face. Hold on, you did it. You protected her. Zar's voice cracked. She protected me. Don't say that. We're getting you out of here. I was not built to survive. I was built to serve. That duty is done. Jonas gritted his teeth. Then let me do something for you. Zar's dying eyes gleamed. Promise me. Anything. Don't let them twist her. Don't let them use her. Let her choose. Even gods must choose. And then, with a breath that shook the chamber, Zarvikuin, the last Aegis, let go. The monolith dimmed. A wind swept across the barren world. And Jonas knelt beside the body of a warrior who had waited eons not to win, but to pass the torch. Behind him, the seed reached out and touched Zar's forehead. A symbol bloomed in gold fire on his armor. White concave-sided diamond. The Dryathi sigil for truth fulfilled. Then the air filled with ships. Not hostile, not council-marked, but civilian, independent, outcast, refugee fleets, all answering the same signal, the same ancient cry. The flame had returned. The burial took place under an amber sky. Zarvikuin's body was interred not with a gravestone, but beneath the heart of the monolith. The seed herself carved a single line into the smooth obsidian surface above him, her glowing fingertip burning the glyphs deep into the stone. No name, no title, just a symbol, white concave-sided diamond. It would be enough. For those who remembered, for those who would now learn. Jonas watched in silence, arms crossed, face drawn. Around him stood dozens of ships from across the stars. Former enemies, former slaves, former ghosts. They come not because they understood what had happened, but because they felt it. A shift, a breath returning to a dying galaxy. The seed, now referred to by many as the sovereign flame, walked beside him. She wore no crown, no armor, just a thin silver robe and a woven bracelet Jonas had made from salvaged wires. She'd refused every symbol of power the ships had offered her. She didn't want to be a goddess. She wanted to be free. But freedom, as Jonas soon learned, came at a cost. They couldn't stay on the world forever. Too many eyes watched the skies now. And the council, what remained of it, had gone dark. Their fleets hadn't retreated. They'd reorganized. Silence was a strategy. And Jonas knew they were planning something. The galaxy didn't forget what it feared. It waited for its chance to destroy it. So Jonas got to work. He pulled together what he could: tech scavengers, ex-military engineers, sentient AIs, even a few rebel matriarchs from the Grenth colonies. Zar's forged technology, combined with the seed's memory of ancient design, created a prototype system for rapid defense generation. Not weapons. Guardians. Constructs forged in the same image as Zar, but without the burdens of war. Meant to protect new colonies, preserve archives, and respond to existential threats. They weren't warriors. They were wards. The first of these mechanical titans stood beside the monolith, silent and watchful. Jonas called it Vikuin's Echo. Still, not everyone approved. The galaxy had been conditioned for too long. Even many refugees questioned the flame's authority. They feared history repeating itself, feared that the rise of one power would mean the fall of all others. In secret councils, conspiracies bloomed, and Jonas found himself doing something he never expected. He gave speeches. He didn't want to. He hated crowds, hated being the face of anything. But the flame asked him, because they trusted him in a way they didn't trust her. So he stood before them, not polished, not grand, just honest. This isn't about replacing the council, he told them, on a windswept day as floating over the flame world. This isn't about starting a new war. This is about ending the one we've all been fighting in silence, for air, for safety, for truth. He paused. They tried to erase someone who protected all of us. Not because he failed, but because he scared them, because he was better. And if we let them do it again, we deserve the next extinction. The crowd had been quiet. Then someone, a squat, six-eyed trader from the rim, stood and shouted, "What should we call this movement?" Jonas shrugged. He looked over his shoulder at the seed. She smiled, and he said, "Call it humanity, not the species. The idea, the refusal to bow, the refusal to let history be written by those with the biggest guns and the loudest lies." And slowly, across the stars, worlds began to speak again. Quietly, hopefully, ships painted white concave-sided diamond symbols on their hulls. Children sang songs of the fire child who awakened a sleeping god. And on battle-scarred outposts, soldiers left alone for too long whispered stories of a warrior who bled silver and protected a human boy because he was the only one who didn't run away. But it wasn't easy. Jonas knew better than to believe in fairy tale endings. Sabotage efforts struck early colonies. An assassination attempt on the seed was foiled by an ex-council spy who had defected after seeing Tsar's sacrifice. Even Jonas got hit once, shoulder shot clean through on a diplomatic run. The flame healed him, but left a scar, and the fear that it was only the beginning. Still, the seed of change had been planted, and it grew, one colony, one ship, one voice at a time, until even council strongholds began to fracture. Some simply disappeared. Others declared neutrality. A few, quietly, sent envoys. No one dared challenge the flame outright again, because they all remembered what had happened last time. But more than that, they feared the one human who stood beside her. Not because he was strong, not because he was chosen, but because he reminded them of something they thought they had erased. A species that defied extinction. A mechanic who ran toward a fight no one else would touch. And a belief, ancient, irrational, and contagious, that some things were worth protecting, even if it cost you everything. Tsar had given his life. The seed had given her power. And Jonas had given his humanity. It began as a whisper. On the far edge of the silent veil, traders spoke of a glowing monolith that pulsed with warmth in the cold dark of deep space. Pilots who passed by claimed they dreamed of fire and metal, of a single eye watching the stars with unblinking calm. A memory, some said. A warning, others insisted. But most called it a promise. White concave-sided diamond. 300 standard years after the war forging of the flame, the Galactic Registry officially altered the maps. Sector 9 Vikuin was no longer marked uninhabitable, class, dead world. It was now listed as Sanctuary, a garden planet reborn from a world of ash. Forests thrived beneath glass-like skies. The flame seed, no longer a single being, but a collective sentience of caretakers, guided terraforming across dozens of exiled systems. Humanity had long since splintered into colonies, lost ships, and hybrid descendants. They were no longer the fragile species from a blue dot in a forgotten sector. They had become something else. They called themselves the Echo Kin, those who bore the will to protect without conquest, to remember without chains. And their legend? It lived in the words they taught their children. Not a religion, not even a name, just a story of a lonely mechanic who walked into the heart of a war machine and came out with hope. White concave-sided diamond. But not all endings were clean. In the dark space beyond the Reach, the place where the Council once ruled, the remnants festered. The last of the Silent Admirals, a mindless AI construct named Jovial, 9, began reactivating the old black sites. He unearthed the Forbidden Archives, reconstructed primitive mind flayers, even began synthesizing ancient emotionless warriors designed to mimic Tsar's form, but without his heart. He called them the Vikuin Nulls. They had no voices. They were not created to protect. They were made to erase. And in their twisted programming, one priority screamed above all: find a flame, kill the human. White concave-sided diamond. It didn't take long before the kin heard whispers of entire systems going dark again. Old instincts returned. Not panic, preparation. The kin weren't a military empire, but they didn't need to be. Every colony had a sentinel, one of the living guardians forged in the image of Tsar. Every AI bore partial imprint backups of Jonas's last logs. Every new Flamekeeper could trace their code work to the original forge patterns Tsar encoded before his death. And one more thing. Jonas had left a final directive. It was encrypted inside the monolith, locked behind a voice print, a biometric signal, and a riddle that only someone who understood why Tsar had wept could answer. When it finally activated, when the Nulls approached within 2 light minutes of Sanctuary, the sky split open, and the stars answered. White concave-sided diamond. The galaxy would never forget what followed. A chorus of voices, alien and human and something in between, filled the relay networks. The Nulls were met with silence first, then resistance. Ships piloted by descendants of those once oppressed, by former AI who now chose to protect. And in the middle of it all, a single human hybrid, born generations after Jonas's death, stood aboard a torch ship forged from flame and memory. She bore no weapon, only her voice. And her voice activated the final guardian, Tsar's Echo Prime. Towering above the stars, larger than any warship, it ignited with living fire. The flame had never truly died. It had evolved, not into a ruler, but into a legacy. White concave-sided diamond. In the end, the Nulls were defeated not because they were weak, but because they misunderstood the most human truth of all. You can kill the body, you can erase the name, but you can never unmake the will. Jonas had said it once in a quiet moment, when he thought no one was listening. We didn't survive because we were stronger. We survived because we looked at impossible odds and said, okay, what's next? That phrase, those 4 words, became the motto engraved across the Flame World gates. Human, don't stop. It became a rallying cry, a prayer, a challenge to every being who ever felt small in a universe of giants. It echoed across schools, ships, ruins, and battlefields. Even those who feared humanity began to whisper it. Because in those 300 years, what had once been a lone man and a feared warrior became something more. A myth. And myths? They don't die. They ignite. White concave-sided diamond. Somewhere, in a place no map dares to name, a single spark blinked into life. A child, half human, half something unrecorded, held a piece of old metal in her hand. On it, scratched by a trembling tool, were 2 glyphs. White concave-sided diamond. And J. The child looked to the stars and smiled. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, but one phrase remained whispered among the stars. Words spoken in defiance, in hope, in unbreakable will. Human, don't stop.